Hello viewers, welcome to today's class. Today we are going to look at the novel The Room on the Roof written by Ruskin Bond. It is a semi-autobiographical work which looks at the life of a 16-year-old boy, Rusty. He is an Anglo-Indian boy who has lost his parents and who stays with his guardian at Dehradun in India. The novel captures the trials and the tribulations he has to face when he runs away from his home and has to live on his own. It is, in short, a coming-of-age novel. Before we go into the novel in detail, let's have a look at the biography of the author Ruskin Bond, because this work is related to some extent to his life. Ruskin Bond is an Indian author of British descent. He is a poet, a novelist, a short fiction writer, an essayist, and an editor. He is one of the most versatile, original, and elegant writers in English for children, young adults, and adults. He was born on 19th May 1934 in a military hospital in Kasauli, Himachal Pradesh, India. His parents were Edith Clerk and Aubrey Bond. He had two siblings, Ellen and William. Ruskin's father was with the Royal Air Force. When Bond was 4 years old, his mother separated from his father and married a Punjabi Hindu, Mr. Hari, who himself was married once. Ruskin Bond, who was raised by his mother, spent his early childhood in India at Jamnagar and Shimla. At the age of 10, Ruskin went to live at his grandmother's house in Dehradun after his father's sudden death in 1944 from malaria. He completed his schooling at Bishop Cotton School in Shimla, from where he graduated in 1952 after winning several writing competitions in the school like the Irwin Divinity Prize and the Haley Literature Prize. Following his high school education, he went to his aunt's house in England and stayed there for 4 years. In London, he started writing his first novel, The Room on the Roof, the semi-autobiographical story of the orphaned Anglo-Indian boy Rusty. It won the 1957 John Llewellyn Rhys Prize awarded to a British Commonwealth writer under 30 years. Bond, however, used the advance money from the book to pay the sea passage to Bombay. He reached Bombay in 1955 to become a full-time writer. He worked for some years as a journalist in Delhi and in Dehradun. Since 1963, he has lived as a freelance writer in Mussoorie, a town in the Himalayan foothills. By the early 2000s, he was the author of 80 books and around 400 newspaper articles. He has published over 20 children's titles in England and the United States, and some of his most popular works have been translated into Danish, Dutch, French, German, and Spanish. Thus, we can see that he is a well-known and widely read author throughout the world. The Indian Council for Child Education recognized his pioneering role in the growth of children's literature in India and awarded him the Sahitya Akademi Award in 1992 for Our Trees Still Grow in Dehra. He was awarded the Padma Shri in 1999 for his contributions to children's literature. He now lives with his adopted family in Landur near Mussoorie. It is interesting to note that many of his works have been adapted into films. His novel The Flight of Pigeons has been adapted into the film Junoon, and so is his story The Blue Umbrella. Vishal Bharadwaj's film Sat Khoon Maaf is based on a short story Susanna's Seven Husbands. The Room on the Roof, the novel which we are studying today, has been adapted into a BBC produced TV series also. Dear viewers, let's now have a look at the major works of Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond is considered as a pioneer in the field of children's and young adult literature. He has also contributed to the development of English writing in India under the difficult publishing circumstances in post-independence India. It is interesting to note that he has synthesized his British heritage with the indigenous culture, languages and ethos of the Himalayan region. The autobiographical nuances in his works are a direct result of this hybridity or dual vision. This aspect gives his work a certain amount of complexity and richness. Although Bond has published an occasional short story for children from 1956 onward, it was not until the late 1960s and early 1970s, after moving to Missouri, that he started writing primarily for children. Bond sees the world of the child as a safe and benign place where there is loving, nurturing relationship between children and adults. In his works, The Road to the Bazaar, The Hidden Pool, Cricket for the Crocodile, Getting Granny's Glasses and The Cherry Tree, all set in small town India, summertime serves as a metaphor for the carefree age of mischief and fun, conveying a mood of comfort, optimism and joyousness. In his work, The Adventures of Rusty, he gently deconstructs the image of the superior British Sahib in India through the hilarious misadventures of Uncle Ken. In another work, The Prospect of Flowers, the friendship between the elderly Miss Mackenzie and an Indian schoolboy is a touching reminder not only of the interdependence of the old and the young, but also of how an era that has passed can enrich and inform the one that follows. In contrast, Bond's adolescent novels are filled with harsh reality, where the protagonists are victims of adult failure, economic and social problems, or incompatible marriages. The Room on the Roof and its sequel, The Young Vagrants, exposes social pretensions and narrow-mindedness by giving a sympathetic portrait of Rusty and a group of vagrants who befriend each other without looking through the mirror of social success or racial and cultural differences. In both novels, Rusty's journeys also serve as a metaphor for exploring the post-colonial themes of home, nation and hybridity. Ruskin Bond has also published 2 volumes of autobiography. The first one, The Scenes from a Writer's Life, describes his formative years growing up in Anglo-India. The second work, The Lamp is Lit, is a collection of essays and episodes from his journal. His interest in the paranormal led him to write popular titles such as Ghost Stories from the Raj, A Season of Ghosts, A Phase in the Dark, and other hauntings. Thus, we can find that Ruskin Bond is a prolific writer. Dear viewers, now let us look at the novel in detail. The Room on the Roof is a novel that belongs to the group of novels Bond wrote for the adolescents. It is a coming-of-age novel that explores the life of the Anglo-Indian protagonist Rusty. This novel was published when Ruskin Bond was 19 years old, and it won him the John Llewellyn Rhys Award. This novel looks at the typical adolescent concerns of identity formation, rebellion against adult restrictions, emerging sexuality, and the desire for financial independence. Regarding this aspect, a critic, Satish C. Aikant, writes that Bond conjures up a different world altogether when he depicts innocent children at the threshold of experience. The child who gradually discovers truth about himself and the world is not treated as the other but only as an inexperienced adult. This is very true when it comes to the novel The Room on the Roof and the protagonist Rusty. Rusty is a 16-year-old boy. After his parents' death, he has been living with his caretaker, his English guardian, Mr. John Harrison, one of his father's cousin, at Dehradun. He was quite unhappy with the ruthless way and strict rules of his guardian and decides to break free one day. So he goes to a nearby market and explores the life and the people there. Somehow Rusty meets a bunch of Indian boys, particularly Somi and Ranbir, who become friends with him, and together they explore the streets of Dehradun. He has been living in a very enclosed environment with his guardian. So, when Rusty gets involved in Indian festivals like Holi and Diwali, he feels liberated. He abandons his caretaker on a sore note and starts living with his friends. But he had to earn a living. So he uses the advantage of being English and he starts teaching English to the boys around him in the neighborhood, especially the boy Kishan, whose family lets Rusty live with them in a room on their rooftop. Here is when Rusty meets life. He discovers that life is not that easy and he has to face a number of challenges that are waiting for him. While Rusty is teaching Kishan English, he falls in love with Kishan's mother, who was the wife of drunken Mr. Kapoor. Rusty and Mrs. Kapoor bond very well and share many intimate moments. Just when Rusty starts feeling happy and contented with his life, Mrs. Kapoor dies in an accident. His life changes from then onwards. Kishan and Mr. Kapoor go away to stay at one of their relatives' house. So, Kishan is also taken away from him. Rusty does not know how to spend time without Mrs. Kapoor, and his other friends are also very busy with their own work and their families. Rusty so decides to go back to England, but he wants to meet Kishan once before he leaves India. When he reaches Mr. Kapoor's house, he learns that he has already married and Kishan is still in Dehra as he did not want to live with a drunken dad and a stepmother. Rusty heads back to Dehra and finds Kishan in the company of pickpockets. Rusty wanted to share his life with someone, and Kishan needed someone who could show him the right way to live. So Rusty decides to stay back and start a chaat ki dukaan. And in the spare time, he may also teach English. And Kishan would be there to assist him in his new job. Thus, in the novel, Bond shows respect for the intelligence of children to discriminate between right and wrong and allows them to resolve their inner conflicts as they gain experience and understanding in their transformation to adolescence and later adulthood. viewers, we have already seen the summary of the novel. Now let us have a look at the main characters in the novel. An interesting aspect of Ruskin Bond's novels is the way he creates the characters. According to Sadiq C. Ikand, when it comes to Bond's characters, they are created in a doubly reflexive process. This is visible in the way the characters are created through the author's own voice and through the medium of other people's impressions. This double coding is present particularly in his novels, where he deals with characters who are children on the brink of transformation into adults. The main character of The Room on the Roof is Rusty, a 16-year-old Anglo-Indian. The book revolves around his thoughts and his feelings. It is based on the blooming of his character from a meek, dependent kid to an independent, strong boy. The transformation that comes in the life of Rusty and the people around him is the main focus of the novel. The poetic thoughts about his surroundings, his positive and strong attitude even when he is in a bad situation or when he has many adverse experiences, his feelings and his friendship are all well explored by Ruskin Bond. His happiness lies in the freedom he discovers when he runs away from his home. The happiness that he derives from this act accompanies him even when he faces problems and when he is going through bad days. The other important characters in the novel are Sony and Ranbir, his friends. They are Rusty's best pals. It has to be noted here that these two boys are special as they are Indians and they are the ones who introduce Rusty to the Indian way of life. Being all alone in the Indian side of the town, they are his only hope and support in times of happiness and troubles. Another important character is of course Kishan. He is Rusty's student. In spite of Kishan being a rowdy and a rude boy, he is attracted to Rusty as Rusty is the only one who understands him. Kishan and Rusty both were divorced from mankind created by their own unique circumstances, and Rusty was the only one who understood their misery and tried to find a solution to their problems. Now there are Mr. and Mrs. Kapoor. This is the kind family that has given Rusty a job of teaching English to their son Kishan. And Mrs. Kapoor or Meena Kapoor is Rusty's love interest in the novel. Mr. John Harrison, his British guardian and the cousin of Rusty's dad, is also an important character in the novel. As is the characteristic of Ruskin Bond's adolescent novels, this novel also deals with the harsh realities that these young characters have to face. As a result, Bond creates characters that are very realistic and down to earth. These characters could be found even now around us. This is what makes Ruskin Bond's works really famous and endearing to the young and the adult alike. Now let us look at the autobiographical elements in the novel. Ever since Ruskin Bond has published his first novel, The Room on the Roof, the autobiographical streak is present in most of his narratives. He imaginatively transforms his personal experiences and observations into entertaining yet thought-provoking stories. His first novel is widely considered as a semi-autobiographical work. There are several aspects in the novel, The Room on the Roof, and in the characters, particularly Rusty, that have similarities with the life and times of the young Ruskin Bond. Most of his works are influenced by the life in the hill stations of the foothills of the Himalayas, where he spent most of his childhood. As his first novel, The Room on the Roof, which was written when he was 17 and published when he was 19, the memories of his life in the town of Dehradun must have been a huge influence on the author when he was writing this novel. It is partly based on his experiences at Dehradun, in his small rented room on the roof and with his friends at Dehradun. This is visible to a large extent in the way Bond describes the life in the town of Dehradun, which young Rusty discovers along with his friends Somi and Ranbir. Another important autobiographical element present in the novel would be the way the British lived in India. Bond himself is a British by descent, so it is inevitable that he present through this novel a poignant portrait of the difficulties many British in India faced just before decolonization. This is visible through the rough and strict character of his guardian, Mr. John Harrison. It is also interesting to note that it is with the help of his pals that he discovers the Indian side of the town, which also gives us an outline as to how the life and the public space in the hill station was divided between the Indian and the non-natives. The harsh realities that Rusty faces, particularly in terms of his identity as an outsider, is also a key aspect from the life of Ruskin Bond himself. Through the Kapoor family and through Rusty's relationship with them, Bond captures the problems that are faced by youngsters who have to deal with the drifts between a father and a mother and the many problems in the family. It has to be noted that Ruskin Bond also must have had similar experiences when his mother separated from his father and got married to an Indian. This could be visible through the character Kishan. The problems arising out of the marital conflicts and its impact on the children have been captured very clearly in the novel. Dear viewers, now let's have a look at the setting of the novel. Ruskin Bond's first major work, The Room on the Roof, was written because he longed for the familiar images and atmosphere of India. Swadeshi Aikand, in a review of Ruskin Bond's works, writes that Ruskin Bond is adept at recreating a natural setting for his stories, and in a way that scenery does not subordinate but sometimes takes an extra dimensional human significance. This is very evident in the novel The Room on the Roof. He captures the life of Rusty and his friends in relation with the spontaneity and rhythms that form a part of the life around them. The novel is set in post-independent India. This aspect is crucial to the understanding of the novel and the protagonist. The events described in the novel that takes place at the time of the decolonization after India has got her independence when the British is retreating from India. This novel looks at the life in the hill stations in the Himalayan region, which were the preferred destinations for the British. Dehradun, where the majority of the action in the novel takes place, is one such destination, and as a hill town, it was an important place during the British Raj, as many of the British officers had settled down in such places and made it their home. Interestingly, the post-independent hill town of Dehradun is an important part of the novel, it can be easily considered as one of the characters in the novel. It is all the more important because the protagonist is a British by descent. He is a representative of all those British who stayed back even after Indian independence. The setting is crucial also in depicting how Rusty adapts himself to the life on the Indian side of the hill town. There are many instances where this aspect comes out in the novel. Often, Rusty roams around Dara eating chaat pakoras and spends time in silence on the hilltops of Dara with his friends. Rusty had never had such kind of Indian food when he was staying with his guardian, and from his reaction when he tasted tikkis for the first time, it is clear, and I quote an instance from the novel. Rusty tasted a bit. It was hot. He waited a minute, then tasted another bit. It was still hot, but in a different way. Now it was lively, interesting. It had a different taste to anything he has had before. Suspicious but inquisitive, he finished the tikkis and waited to see if anything would happen. This is in fact a reaction from a non-native to a native food. In a way, the setting of the novel plays a crucial role in bringing about the transformation in the character of Rusty. Dear viewers, now let us have a look at the craftsmanship of Ruskin Bond, the way he writes. As a craftsman, Ruskin Bond is best known for his short stories and novels. He has this capacity of working well within the unified format of the short story or novella. Most often, his plots are well structured and they revolve around a single event that either catches the protagonist in a revealing situation or enables him to resolve a personal dilemma. This is the case when we come to the novel The Room on the Roof. There is also an element of humor in his works. Ruskin Bond is also a humorist who loves to poke fun at human folly and expose hypocrisy and immoral behavior, especially in people who are in positions of power. In the novel The Room on the Roof, this can be seen through the characters. A funny and humorous incident would be the conversation between Somi and Rusty when Rusty eats tikki for the first time. So Somi asks Rusty, "Have you had before?" "No," said Rusty. "What will it do?" "Somi, it might worry your stomach a little at first, but you will get used to it the more often you eat. So finish the other one too." This is a funny incident from the novel. By skillfully juxtaposing these individual dramas against larger social, moral, or metaphysical issues, Bond's graceful prose directs readers to contemplate both universal truths as well as a thoughtful exploration of questions that perplex his characters. In other words, his style of writing has a very engaging quality, and the readers are literally taken on a ride through the places and the characters he creates. His writing also transcends the regional locale and the autobiographical elements sometimes. It is a reflection of the human endeavor to survive against odds and to preserve what is beautiful and meaningful, which is clearly evident in the character of Rusty in this novel. Ruskin Bond is a lover of nature whose simple yet highly evocative writings reflect a deep kinship with the majestic Himalayas. Nature's comforting presence in the lives of children is a characteristic of his work and is visible to a large extent in A Room on the Roof. Another recurring theme in Ruskin Bond's stories is the tension between the simplicity and stability of small towns as against the flux and complexity of the city life. Reminiscent of the pastoral tradition in literature, the small town is a place that endures changes slowly and is equated with purity and contemplation, while the city has lost its connection with the land and its inhabitants have become aggressive and materialistic at the expense of basic human values. However, Ruskin Bond is not just being nostalgic because through physical symbols and the bridge of memory, the past becomes a living presence in the lives of the protagonists. Dear viewers, today we have looked at the novel The Room on the Roof, and we have looked at the many aspects that is depicted in the novel, particularly the autobiographical elements that is present in the novel, the setting of the novel, the main themes of the novels, and the major characters of the novel. I hope you had a nice time. Thank you.